Have you ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know who you really are? Well, one bank manager learned that lesson the hard way. You might think this is just another story of arrogance in customer service, but this one goes even further. The manager didn't know that the customer in front of him was literally a millionaire. Before we continue, leave a comment below telling me where you're watching this video from. I'd love to know. James was a man of contradictions. His bank account boasted numbers that would make even the most seasoned Wall Street tycoons green with envy. Yet he walked the streets in worn-out jeans and faded hoodies. His hands, calloused from years of hard work that had built his empire from the ground up, were often shoved deep into the pockets of jackets that had seen better days. It wasn't that James couldn't afford the finest tailored suits or the most luxurious accessories. Rather, he chose not to indulge in them. For James, true wealth wasn't measured by the brand of watch on his wrist or the shine of his shoes. It was something far more intangible, a sense of purpose, a connection to the world around him that no amount of money could buy. He found a peculiar comfort in blending in with the masses, observing life unfold around him without the veil of preconceived notions that often accompanied visible wealth. On this particular morning, as the autumn sun struggled to pierce through the veil of clouds hanging low over the city, James made his way down the crowded sidewalk. The cool air nipped at his exposed skin, a reminder of the changing seasons. All around him, New Yorkers rushed to and fro, their eyes fixed on smartphone screens or distant horizons, barely registering the world immediately surrounding them. James paused for a moment, inhaling deeply. The scent of freshly baked bagels wafted from a nearby deli, mingling with the ever-present undercurrent of coffee that seemed to fuel the city's relentless pace. A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth as he watched a young couple, lost in each other's eyes, navigate the bustling street with an ease that suggested they were floating in their own private bubble of bliss. These were the moments James treasured. Small, seemingly insignificant snapshots of humanity that reminded him why he had worked so hard to amass his fortune. It wasn't for the power or the prestige, it was for the potential to make a difference, to touch lives in ways both big and small. With a slight shake of his head, as if to clear away the contemplative fog that had settled over him, James resumed his walk. His destination loomed ahead, a towering edifice of glass and steel that housed one of the city's most prestigious financial institutions. It was time to make a deposit, a routine task that would normally be delegated to an assistant or handled with a few taps on a smartphone. But James preferred the personal touch, the face-to-face interactions that kept him grounded in reality. As he approached the bank's revolving doors, James couldn't help but feel a twinge of anticipation. Something in the air felt different today, charged with an energy that hinted at change on the horizon. Little did he know that beyond those doors lay an encounter that would not only challenge his own perceptions, but would send ripples through the lives of everyone involved. With a deep breath, James stepped forward, the glass doors spinning to admit him into the cool, marble-lined interior of the bank. The hushed atmosphere enveloped him, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the streets outside. Here, in this temple of finance, James was about to receive a lesson in humility, one that would test his patience, challenge his values, and ultimately reaffirm his belief in the inherent worth of every individual, regardless of their outward appearance. As the doors closed behind him, sealing off the outside world, James Carter, millionaire, philanthropist, and unassuming everyman, prepared to face an ordeal that would change not only his life, but the lives of those around him in ways he could never have imagined. The stage was set for a drama of human nature, a tale of prejudice and redemption that would unfold within these hallowed halls of commerce. Little did the bank's employees know that the man in the worn jeans and simple hoodie was about to turn their world upside down. challenging their preconceptions and forcing them to confront the uncomfortable truth about their own biases. For James, it was just another day, another opportunity to observe and understand the human condition. But for those he was about to encounter, it would be a day that would alter the course of their lives forever. The interior of the bank was a study in contrasts. Polished marble floors reflected the soft glow of ornate chandeliers, while sleek digital displays flickered with the latest stock market updates. It was a place where old-world opulence met cutting-edge technology, a physical manifestation of the financial industry's evolving nature. As James stepped further into the lobby, his worn sneakers squeaking slightly against the immaculate floor, he couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Eyes darted in his direction, quickly averting when he met their gaze. Whispers rippled through the air, barely audible but laden with judgment. It was a dance James had seen many times before, the silent, often unconscious categorization of individuals based on nothing more than a fleeting glance. At the center of this whirlwind of quiet judgment stood Sarah, the bank's manager. Impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, her auburn hair pulled back into a severe bun, she exuded an aura of efficiency and authority. Her sharp eyes, a steely blue that seemed to cut through pretense, scanned the lobby with the precision of a seasoned predator. Sarah prided herself on her ability to read people, to discern at a glance who was worth her time and who wasn't. It was a skill she had honed over years in the financial sector, a talent that had propelled her up the corporate ladder with remarkable speed. In her world, appearance was everything. It was the first chapter in the story a person told about themselves, and Sarah considered herself an expert at reading between the lines. As her gaze fell upon James, Sarah's lips tightened almost imperceptibly. In her mind, the equation was simple. Worn clothes equaled minimal worth. It was a calculation she had made countless times, one that had rarely steered her wrong. With a barely suppressed sigh, she gestured to one of her junior associates, delegating what she perceived to be a waste of her valuable time. James, keenly aware of the subtle interplay of expressions and body language unfolding around him, approached the counter with measured steps. He had long ago learned to find amusement in these situations rather than take offense. Each interaction was an opportunity to learn, to understand the complex tapestry of human nature. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm and clear, a stark contrast to the cool reception he was receiving. "I'd like to discuss some investment options, please." The young associate behind the counter, taking her cue from Sarah's dismissive attitude, barely glanced up from her computer screen. "Investment options?" she repeated, her tone suggesting she was humoring him rather than taking his request seriously. "Perhaps you'd like to start with our basic savings accounts." James smiled, a gentle expression that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners with genuine amusement. "Actually, I was thinking more along the lines of high-yield portfolios or perhaps some diversified fund options. I'm looking to make a significant investment today." At this, Sarah's attention snapped back to the conversation. Her instincts, honed by years of chasing high-value clients, were suddenly at war with the evidence before her eyes. She stepped forward, smoothly inserting herself into the interaction. "I apologize, sir," Sarah said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "But I'm afraid you might be in the wrong place for that kind of big money talk." The pause before big money was slight but unmistakable, a verbal eye roll that spoke volumes about her assessment of James's financial status. James, rather than taking offense, found himself fascinated by the layers of assumption and prejudice playing out before him. It was like watching a masterclass in unconscious bias, a real-time demonstration of how deeply ingrained societal judgments could be. "I see," he replied, his tone neutral but his eyes twinkling with an inner light that spoke of hidden depths. "And what, may I ask, makes you so certain that I'm not in the right place?" Sarah's smile tightened, a flash of uncertainty crossing her features before she regained her composure. "Well, Mr. Carter," James supplied helpfully. "James Carter." "Mr. Carter," Sarah continued, the name carrying no weight of recognition for her. "Our high-yield investment options are typically reserved for our more established clients. Perhaps we could start by reviewing your current financial situation." It was a masterful deflection, James had to admit. Sarah was trying to regain control of the conversation, to steer it back into familiar waters where she felt confident in her superiority. "By all means," James agreed amiably. "I'd be happy to discuss my financial situation in detail. Shall we use my current account as a starting point?" Sarah nodded, a hint of relief crossing her face as she guided James towards a more private consultation area. She was certain that once she had the hard numbers in front of her, she could quickly dispatch this oddly persistent man in shabby clothes. As they settled into the plush leather chairs of the consultation room, Sarah pulled up James's account information on her tablet. Her fingers flew across the screen with practiced ease, but as the numbers began to populate the display, her movements slowed, then stopped altogether. James watched with quiet amusement as the color drained from Sarah's face. Her eyes widened, darting between the screen and James's unassuming figure, as if unable to reconcile the two. This can't be right," Sarah muttered, more to herself than to James. "There must be some mistake." "Is there a problem?" James inquired innocently, leaning forward with an expression of concern. Sarah swallowed hard, her professional demeanor cracking under the weight of her shock. "Mr. Carter, I owe you an apology. It seems I've made a terrible mistake in my assessment of your financial situation." James leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs casually. "No apology necessary, Sarah. I'm sure you were just following your instincts. Tell me, though, what was it about me that led you to your initial conclusion?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Sarah found herself at a crossroads, facing a moment of truth that would force her to confront her own biases and preconceptions. As the reality of the situation sank in, the bustling bank lobby outside the consultation room faded into the background. In this moment, it was just Sarah and James, locked in a silent battle of wills and values. The true measure of a person, James knew, was not in how they treated those they perceived as their equals or superiors, but in how they treated those they believed to be beneath them. Sarah's next words, her next actions, would reveal far more about her character than any designer suit or polished resume ever could. And James, the unassuming millionaire in worn-out jeans, settled in to watch the transformation unfold, knowing that sometimes the greatest lessons in life come from the most unexpected teachers. The silence in the consultation room stretched like a rubber band, taut with tension and on the verge of snapping. Sarah's mind raced, a chaotic whirlwind of thoughts and emotions threatening to overwhelm her carefully cultivated professional facade. She had built her career on her ability to read people, to categorize and prioritize clients based on a complex algorithm of appearance, behavior, and perceived worth. Now, sitting across from James Carter, a man whose bank balance defied everything her instincts had told her, Sarah felt the foundations of her worldview beginning to crumble. James watched her internal struggle with a mixture of curiosity and compassion. He had seen this reaction before, the moment when someone's preconceptions collided head-on with reality. It was often a painful process, but one that held the potential for tremendous growth and self-reflection. I'm not sure how to answer that, Mr. Carter," Sarah finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The admission of uncertainty seemed to physically pain her, as if acknowledging her mistake was akin to admitting defeat. James leaned forward, his eyes kind but penetrating. "It's a simple question, Sarah. What was it about me that led you to dismiss me so readily? My clothes, my demeanor, or perhaps something deeper, something you might not even be fully aware of?" Sarah's cheeks flushed, a mix of embarrassment and defensive anger coloring her features. "Mr. Carter, I assure you that our bank prides itself on providing excellent service to all our clients, regardless of their appearance." "And yet," James pressed gently, "here we are. I was redirected, dismissed, and nearly shown the door, all before anyone bothered to check my account details. That doesn't sound like excellent service for all clients, does it?" The truth of his words hung heavy in the air between them. Sarah found herself at a crossroads, facing a moment that could define not just her career, but her character. She could double down, defend her actions, and potentially salvage her pride. Or she could do something far more difficult. She could admit her mistake and open herself to change. As Sarah wrestled with her response, James's mind drifted to the events that had led him to this moment. He thought about his own journey, the years of hard work and smart investments that had built his fortune. But more than that, he thought about the lessons he had learned along the way. Lessons about the true nature of wealth. For the first time since their encounter began, James saw past the polished exterior to the human being beneath. A woman who had worked hard to reach her position, who prided herself on her competence, and who was now facing a harsh truth about her own biases. "Thank you for your honesty, Sarah," James said softly. "It takes courage to admit when we're wrong, especially about something so fundamental to our worldview. But tell me, where do we go from here? How do we ensure that what happened today doesn't happen to someone else tomorrow?" Sarah straightened in her chair, a spark of determination replacing the uncertainty in her eyes. "We change," she said simply. "We change our training, our policies, our entire approach to customer service. We create a culture where every client, regardless of their appearance or the size of their account, is treated with respect and dignity." James nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's an admirable goal, Sarah. But change like that doesn't happen overnight. It requires commitment, persistence, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our institutions. Are you prepared for that kind of challenge?" The question hung in the air between them, a gauntlet thrown down not in anger or retribution, but as an invitation to growth and transformation. Sarah felt the weight of the moment, understanding that her answer would set the course not just for her own future, but for the future of the entire bank. As Sarah opened her mouth to respond, a commotion from the bank lobby filtered through the closed door of the consultation room. The muffled sounds of raised voices and hurried footsteps served as a stark reminder that the world beyond this room continued to turn, oblivious to the profound shift taking place within these four walls. James and Sarah exchanged a glance, the shared recognition that their private drama was about to collide with the public sphere. Whatever came next would test the sincerity of Sarah's words and the depth of James's commitment to fostering change. With a deep breath, Sarah stood, smoothing down her suit jacket in a reflexive gesture of composure. "Shall we?" she said, gesturing towards the door. James nodded, rising from his chair with a fluid grace that belied his unassuming appearance. As they moved towards the door, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The next few moments would be crucial, not just for Sarah and himself, but for everyone in the bank. It was an opportunity to turn a personal epiphany into a catalyst for widespread change. As Sarah reached for the door handle, James gently placed a hand on her arm, causing her to pause. "Remember," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, "this isn't about punishment or shame. It's about growth, about creating a better environment for everyone. Are you ready?" Sarah met his gaze, her eyes reflecting a mix of trepidation and resolve. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "I'm ready," she replied, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions roiling beneath the surface. With a nod of understanding, James stepped back, allowing Sarah to take the lead. It was a small gesture, but one loaded with meaning. He was giving her the chance to address the situation on her own terms, to begin the process of change from a place of authority and authenticity. As the door swung open, the sounds from the lobby intensified. The hushed whispers and muffled conversations they had heard earlier had given way to a buzz of confusion and speculation. Employees huddled in small groups, casting furtive glances towards the consultation room. The air was thick with tension, a palpable sense that something significant was about to unfold. Sarah strode out into the lobby, her heels clicking against the marble floor with purposeful strides. James followed a step behind, his presence a silent support as Sarah prepared to address her staff. As they emerged, a hush fell over the gathered employees. All eyes turned to Sarah, awaiting an explanation for the unusual events of the morning. Taking a deep breath, Sarah raised her voice to address the room. "Everyone, may I have your attention, please?" The few murmurs that remained quickly died down, leaving an expectant silence in their wake. "I need to speak with all of you about something important." As Sarah began to speak, James observed the reactions of the staff. He saw confusion, curiosity, and in some cases, a flicker of understanding as they began to piece together what might have transpired. He noticed the young associate who had initially dismissed him, her eyes wide with realization as she glanced between James and Sarah. "This morning," Sarah continued, her voice clear and unwavering, "we had an experience that has opened my eyes to a serious issue within our organization. An issue that I, as your manager, have been not only complicit in, but actively perpetuating." A ripple of surprise ran through the assembled staff. It was rare to hear Sarah, known for her unwavering confidence, speak with such humility. "We pride ourselves on providing excellent service to our clients," Sarah went on, "but today we failed spectacularly in that mission. We judged a client based solely on his appearance, and in doing so, we nearly turned away one of our most valuable account holders." At this, all eyes turned to James, who stood quietly at Sarah's side. The contrast between his worn jeans and hoodie and the revelation of his financial status was not lost on anyone in the room. James could almost see the gears turning in their minds, preconceptions being dismantled in real time. "But this isn't about one client or one incident," Sarah pressed on, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "This is about a culture that we've allowed to develop, one that values appearance over substance, that judges worth based on outward signs of wealth rather than treating every individual with the respect and dignity they deserve." As Sarah continued to speak, laying out her vision for change and the steps they would need to take as an organization, James found himself impressed by her candor and determination. It would have been easy for her to make a perfunctory apology and move on, to treat this as an isolated incident rather than a symptom of a larger problem. Instead, she was seizing the moment, using it as a catalyst for genuine transformation. The staff listened intently, their expressions ranging from shock to thoughtful consideration. James could see that Sarah's words were having an impact, challenging long-held assumptions and forcing each person to confront their own biases. As Sarah concluded her impromptu speech, a moment of silence hung in the air. Then, slowly at first, but with growing enthusiasm, applause began to ripple through the lobby. It wasn't the polite, obligatory clapping of employees humoring their boss. This was genuine, a spontaneous outpouring of support for the difficult but necessary journey Sarah was proposing. In that moment, as the applause washed over them, James felt a surge of hope. He had walked into the bank that morning expecting nothing more than to make a routine deposit. Instead, he found himself at the heart of a pivotal moment, one that had the potential to change not just this bank, but to ripple out into the wider world of finance and beyond. As the applause began to die down, Sarah turned to James, a question in her eyes. Without a word, he understood what she was asking. With a nod and a smile, he stepped forward, ready to address the staff himself. It was time to share his perspective, to help them understand the impact of their actions and the importance of the changes Sarah was proposing. As James began to speak, his voice calm and measured, he could see the rapt attention on the faces before him. This, he realized, was why he had worked so hard to amass his wealth. Not for the money itself, but for moments like this. Moments when he could use his position to make a real difference, to challenge perceptions and foster change. The story of James Carter and Sarah was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. As James continued to address the staff, sharing his experiences and insights, he knew that the ripples from this morning's events would continue to spread, touching lives and changing perspectives in ways they could not yet imagine. It was a reminder that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the impact one could have on the world around them. And so, in the heart of Manhattan, in a bank that had started the day like any other, a quiet revolution was taking root. It was a revolution of mindset, of empathy, and of human dignity. As James looked out at the sea of faces before him, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. For in helping to open their eyes, he had been reminded once again of the true purpose of his wealth and the power of a single moment to change everything. In the days and weeks that followed the eventful morning at the bank, the ripples of change began to spread outward like waves on a pond. What had started as a personal epiphany for Sarah quickly evolved into a transformative journey for the entire organization. James, true to his nature, didn't simply walk away after making his point. Instead, he saw an opportunity to effect lasting change and seized it with both hands. Working closely with Sarah and the bank's upper management, he helped develop a comprehensive training program designed to address unconscious bias and promote a culture of inclusivity. The program was far from easy. It required each employee, from the newest teller to the most senior executives, to confront their own preconceptions and biases. There were uncomfortable moments, heated discussions, and more than a few tears shed as people grappled with deeply ingrained attitudes they hadn't even realized they held. Sarah, to her credit, led by example. She threw herself into the training with a fervor that inspired her staff. Her willingness to publicly acknowledge her mistakes and commit to personal growth set the tone for the entire organization. Employees who might have been resistant to change found it hard to argue when their own manager was so openly embracing the process. As the weeks turned into months, the changes within the bank became increasingly apparent. The atmosphere in the lobby shifted, becoming more welcoming and inclusive. Employees began to take genuine pride in treating every client with equal respect and attention, regardless of their appearance or perceived wealth. James made a point of visiting the bank regularly, sometimes in his usual casual attire, other times dressed in a sharp suit. He watched with quiet satisfaction as he received the same warm, professional treatment regardless of his outfit. More importantly, he observed as other clients, from all walks of life, were greeted with the same respect and attention. But the impact of that fateful morning didn't stop at the bank's doors. As word of the changes spread through the financial community, other institutions began to take notice. Some were skeptical, viewing it as a publicity stunt or a passing fad. Others, however, recognized the potential benefits, both ethical and financial, of adopting a more inclusive approach. Sarah, once known primarily for her cutthroat efficiency, found herself in demand as a speaker at industry conferences and seminars. She shared her story openly, not shying away from the uncomfortable truths of her past behavior, but focusing on the transformative power of acknowledging and addressing bias. James, preferring to remain in the background, watched with quiet pride as Sarah grew into her role as an advocate for change. He saw in her the same fire, the same determination that had driven him in his early days of building his fortune. But where he had channeled that energy into accumulating wealth, Sarah was using it to reshape the very culture of the financial industry. As the months turned into a year, the bank's approach began to show tangible results. Customer satisfaction scores soared, and word-of-mouth recommendations brought in a steady stream of new clients. Many of these were individuals who might have been overlooked or undervalued in the past. Small business owners, young entrepreneurs, and people from diverse backgrounds who had previously felt unwelcome in traditional banking environments. The bank's success didn't go unnoticed by the media. Articles began to appear in financial journals and mainstream publications alike, highlighting the innovative approach to customer service and inclusivity. James, still preferring to remain anonymous, smiled to himself as he read these stories. The headlines focused on the bank's policies and Sarah's leadership, but he knew the true story: how a simple act of dressing down and walking into a bank had set off a chain reaction that was now reshaping an entire industry. But perhaps the most profound changes were the ones that couldn't be measured in customer satisfaction scores or media coverage. They were the small, everyday interactions that reflected a fundamental shift in attitude. There was the elderly woman, living on a fixed income, who tearfully thanked a young teller for treating her with the same respect and attention as the wealthy businessman in line behind her. There was the teenager, nervously opening his first bank account, who left with a spring in his step, feeling valued and respected despite his youth and inexperience. And then there was Michael, a homeless man who had been a fixture in the neighborhood for years. In the past, security would have ushered him out the moment he stepped foot in the bank. Now he was welcomed in, offered a glass of water, and assisted in opening a small savings account with the few dollars he had managed to save. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a tiny step towards financial stability that might not have been possible in the old paradigm. As James observed these changes, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The wealth he had accumulated over the years had brought him comfort and security. But it was moments like these, seeing the tangible, positive impact on people's lives, that truly made him feel rich. One afternoon, about 18 months after that fateful morning, James found himself back in the consultation room with Sarah. The space had been redesigned, now warm and welcoming rather than imposing. Sarah, too, had changed. The severe bun was gone, replaced by a softer hairstyle that framed a face more prone to smiling than frowning. "I never properly thanked you," Sarah said, her voice soft but sincere. "You could have just called out our behavior, maybe filed a complaint. Instead, you gave us a chance to be better. You saw potential where I only saw problems." James smiled, leaning back in his chair. "You did all the hard work, Sarah. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it and brought everyone else along with you." Sarah shook her head, a rueful smile playing at her lips. "You know, I used to think I was so good at reading people, at knowing their worth at a glance. Now I realize how much I was missing. How many amazing individuals I overlooked because they didn't fit my narrow definition of success." "It's a common mistake," James replied, his voice gentle. "We all do it to some extent. The key is recognizing it and choosing to see beyond the surface." As they continued to chat, reflecting on the journey of the past year and a half, James felt a sense of completion. The ripples from that morning had spread far and wide, touching countless lives in ways both big and small. But here, in this room where it all began, he saw the most profound change of all: a woman who had transformed not just her actions, but her entire worldview. As he prepared to leave, James paused at the door, turning back to Sarah. "You know," he said, a twinkle in his eye, I think it's time for me to find a new bank to walk into wearing my old jeans. There's still a lot of work to be done out there." Sarah laughed, a full, hearty sound that would have been unthinkable from the Sarah of 18 months ago. "Well, if you do, make sure to send them our way for training once you're done shaking things up." With a final nod and a smile, James stepped out into the lobby. As he made his way towards the exit, he observed the buzz of activity around him. Every interaction he saw, every smile exchanged between staff and clients, was a testament to the power of one moment, one decision to see beyond appearances. Pushing through the revolving door, James emerged onto the busy Manhattan street. The city pulsed around him, thousands of stories unfolding with every passing second. As he merged into the flow of pedestrians, just another face in the crowd, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. There were other banks out there, other institutions still mired in the old ways of thinking. And James, with his unassuming appearance and his quiet determination, was ready to continue his work. For he had learned that true wealth wasn't about the balance in his bank account. It was about the positive change he could create in the world, one underestimated individual at a time. As he disappeared into the crowd, the sun glinting off the towering skyscrapers above, James Carter, millionaire, catalyst, and unassuming agent of change, smiled to himself. The next chapter of his journey was just beginning, and he couldn't wait to see where it would lead. As James Carter wove his way through the bustling streets of Manhattan, his mind was already racing with possibilities. The success at Sarah's bank had shown him the profound impact that could be achieved when people were willing to confront their biases and embrace change. But he knew that there was still much work to be done, not just in the world of finance, but in society as a whole. Over the next few months, James embarked on a subtle but determined campaign of change. He visited other banks, high-end stores, and exclusive restaurants, always in his unassuming attire. Some experiences were positive, reminiscent of the transformation he had witnessed with Sarah. Others, however, served as stark reminders of how deeply ingrained prejudices could be. There was the luxury car dealership where he was pointedly ignored, despite his genuine interest in making a purchase. The maitre d' at a Michelin-starred restaurant who tried to turn him away, insisting they were fully booked, even as James could see empty tables. Each encounter, positive or negative, was meticulously documented. James wasn't just observing. He was building a case, gathering evidence of a systemic issue that reached far beyond the walls of any single institution. As his unofficial study grew, James began to see patterns emerging. He noticed how body language shifted when he entered a high-end space in his worn jeans, how tones of voice changed, how assumptions were made in the blink of an eye. But he also observed moments of genuine human connection, instances where individuals chose to see beyond the surface and treat him with dignity regardless of his appearance. One particularly memorable encounter occurred at a prestigious art gallery in Chelsea. James had wandered in, drawn by a vibrant abstract piece visible from the street. The gallery owner, a woman in her 60s with a shock of white hair and piercing green eyes, approached him with a warm smile. "It's breathtaking, isn't it?" she said, gesturing to the painting that had caught James's eye. "The artist has a remarkable way of capturing emotion through color and form." James nodded, pleasantly surprised by the lack of judgment in her tone. "It really is stunning. The way the colors seem to dance and shift. It's almost alive." For the next hour, James and the gallery owner, who introduced herself as Eleanor, engaged in a deep discussion about art, creativity, and the power of perspective. Not once did Eleanor's demeanor change upon realizing James wasn't a typical high-end art buyer. She spoke to him with the same passion and respect she would have afforded any potential client. As James prepared to leave, having purchased the painting that had initially drawn him in, Eleanor placed a hand on his arm. "You know," she said, her eyes twinkling, "I've been in this business for over 4 decades. I've learned that the ability to appreciate beauty has nothing to do with the clothes on one's back or the balance in one's bank account. Thank you for reminding me of that today." James left the gallery with more than just a new piece of art. He had found an ally, someone who inherently understood the message he was trying to spread. Eleanor's words stayed with him, a reminder that there were others out there who saw the world as he did, a place where true value lay in character, not appearances. In the weeks that followed, James found himself returning to the gallery, not just as a customer but as a friend. Eleanor introduced him to local artists, many of whom came from diverse backgrounds and had faced their own struggles with prejudice in the art world. Through these connections, James began to see how his mission could expand beyond the realm of finance and into broader cultural spaces. As his network grew, so did the scope of his vision. James started to see the unseen threads that connected different forms of bias and discrimination across various sectors of society. He realized that the lessons learned in the bank could be applied to art galleries, tech startups, educational institutions, and beyond. With this expanded perspective, James decided it was time to take his mission to the next level. He reached out to Sarah, Eleanor, and others who had demonstrated a genuine commitment to inclusivity and change. Together, they began to formulate a plan for a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting equality and challenging societal biases. The organization, which they named Beyond Appearance, would work on multiple fronts. It would provide training and resources for businesses looking to create more inclusive environments. It would fund scholarships for underprivileged students who had been overlooked by traditional institutions. It would support artists and entrepreneurs from marginalized communities, helping them gain the recognition and opportunities they deserved. As word of the organization spread, James found himself in the unfamiliar position of being in the spotlight. Journalists wanted interviews, conference organizers requested keynote speeches, and business leaders sought his advice. At first, he was reluctant, preferring to work behind the scenes. But he soon realized that his story, the tale of a millionaire in worn jeans who had sparked a movement, had the power to inspire others and drive real change. In one particularly poignant moment, James was invited to speak at a high school in a low-income neighborhood. Looking out at the sea of young faces, he saw hope, determination, and untapped potential. He shared his story, not of his financial success, but of his journey to understand the true meaning of value and worth. "Each of you," he told the students, his voice ringing with conviction, "has immeasurable worth that goes far beyond any material possessions you may or may not have. Your value lies in your character, your creativity, your ability to empathize and connect with others. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than because of how you look or where you come from." The response was overwhelming. Students lined up to talk to him after the speech, sharing their own experiences of being judged or underestimated. In their stories, James saw reflections of his own journey, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. As the years passed, Beyond Appearance grew into a powerful force for change. Its impact could be seen in revised corporate policies, in more diverse boardrooms, in art galleries featuring works from a wider range of artists, and in classrooms where students from all backgrounds were given equal opportunities to shine. James, now in his 60s but still sporting his trademark worn jeans and hoodie, looked back on the journey with a sense of amazement. What had started as a simple trip to the bank had blossomed into a movement that was changing lives and challenging deep-seated societal norms. One crisp autumn morning, James found himself back at the bank where it had all begun. The interior had changed over the years, becoming warmer and more welcoming, but the real transformation was in the people. As he walked through the doors, he was greeted with genuine smiles and respectful nods, not because of who he was or what he was wearing, but simply because he was a fellow human being deserving of dignity. Sarah, now the regional director, rushed out to meet him, her face beaming. "James, I was hoping you'd stop by. We're just about to start our annual inclusivity training for new employees. Would you like to say a few words?" James smiled, feeling the familiar surge of purpose that had driven him for all these years. "I'd be honored," he said, following Sarah into a room full of eager young faces. As he began to speak, sharing the story of that fateful morning and all that had followed, James felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had spent his life accumulating wealth, but it was only when he had learned to look beyond appearances, both his own and others, that he had discovered his true richness. In that moment, surrounded by a new generation of bankers committed to seeing the worth in every individual, James Carter knew that his legacy would not be measured in dollars and cents, but in the lives touched, the minds opened, and the world changed for the better. As he concluded his talk, the room erupted in applause. James looked out at the sea of faces, each one representing a potential agent of change, and he knew that the work would continue. The journey he had started all those years ago, with a simple act of walking into a bank in worn jeans, was far from over. It would be carried forward by these young people, and countless others like them, all committed to looking beyond appearances and recognizing the true value of every individual. And so, as the applause faded and James prepared to take questions from the eager audience, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had discovered the true meaning of wealth. And in sharing that discovery with the world, he had found his life's greatest purpose. The story of James Carter, the millionaire in worn jeans who changed the world, would continue to inspire generations to come, a testament to the enduring power of empathy, understanding, and the courage to challenge our deepest assumptions.